this car I must have dialed in a good bit before. I honestly don't recall, but I've steady state the car all the way up to 4,500 RPM so far, and the targets are like on the money as far as AFR goes. I'm gonna bring it up to like 5,000 RPMs now. I've got to let the car cool down for a little bit. Temperatures started to rise a little bit, not enough to make me concerned, but it did rise enough for me not to want to go forward in terms of like fuel correction and stuff like that because of the temps. So we're gonna let it sit and cool down. I'm gonna take a quick break here for myself, and then we'll go back and we're gonna wrap up, you know, steady state from 5,000 to 5,500 RPMs. We'll get that all dialed in, and then from there I think we're safe to do full wide open throttle blast. Like I said, the fuel table for the most part was just really on the money. There was a little bit of change down low here, but anything that was like above that seemed to be on the money. So I'm super duper happy with it. I can tell you, so you guys can see that the run is definitely not smooth, and it's pig rich up top. So we were like 10 to 1s up top. I've already leaned it out a little bit more. We're letting the car cool down a little bit, but just wanted to guys show you the graph. But however, peak power and peak torque look really, really good. 5,000 RPM, so everything's looking pretty swell. Just need to clean up this little area here. As you guys already know, that my dyno is loaded, so sometimes this happens here where the brake is not fully loaded and it causes this hump at the end. So I usually try to think about this is the actual start of the actual run, but like I said, you can see it kind of doing this whole wavy thing, which is not ideal, but it's not uncommon to see that, especially when your AFRs aren't fully dialed in and timing is pulled out of it. So I turned the boost up while I was charging the camera. I had to charge the camera because the camera was dying. But I turned the boost up to about 17 PSI, and we're at 375-ish right now. So I think we're gonna turn up the boost a little bit more and see what that nets us. I've been adding timing a little bit to get it, just to get a little bit more out of it past peak horsepower, and it's revving out now. But the problem is that you can see that it falls off pretty quickly here. So I'm gonna set the limiter to like 70, like 7,000 RPMs, I think, just because that it just peaks off very quickly. I don't think there's any reason to rev it out that high. So we'll cap off the rev limiter. That way we're just not revving it out all the way. And then we'll do a couple more hits, turn up the boost a little bit more, and then just see kind of what we get. But I'd like to have over 400. The customer's already happy with 375, but I need to get, I actually really need to turn up the boost a little bit. The reason is that when these guys are drifting, the tires are breaking loose and there's not a lot of load. And sometimes they can overspin the turbo and then create more boost. And sometimes if the turbo's too big, they won't make enough boost. But we're gonna go ahead and turn it up just because I want to see 400 horsepower for myself. And then secondly, just so we have a little bit more overhead on the car, just to make it nice and safe. But the biggest thing really is because mama didn't raise no bitch. So let's make 400 horsepower and call it a day. So basically what's gonna happen is I'm going to listen for knock. And if I hear knock, I'm just gonna end the run. Again, we don't care about powers on what the dyno runs. And once we can hear knock, or if we hear knock rather, then we'll have the maximum recorded data on the data log on the laptop. So let's go ahead and hit it and see what we get. All right, so we brought the limiter down. We've got a little bit of something's going on right here. I don't know whether it's slipping on the dyno, which is a possibility, or we are kind of running it close to the edge. And so I did pull a little bit of timing in this area preemptively because the last two runs, before the last run, the two runs before that, you could see like I let off early because we started to hear knock. So I did pull off a little bit of timing in this area, but like I said, this could be from slip. But ultimately, in the end, we ended up hitting our goals of hitting little over 400 horsepower, 380 foot-pounds of torque, and we did shorten the limiter because it just stops making power. So there's no point to run it that far out. I may even drop it down a little bit further because you can see as it starts to narrow down right there. But yeah, that's basically it. So we're done here. I'm going to spend some time cleaning up the tune itself, but overall I'm pretty happy. We're gonna bring the boost back down as well, just that, like I said, that way we have a little bit of headroom on power, and he can also say that the car made 400 horsepower. All right, so you guys can see that the dip here cleared up a little bit. It's still there, but it's not as apparent. I mean, it's still pretty apparent, but looks like we got a little bit more timing. The good news is I didn't hear any knock this time around. So it potentially could have been heat related knock, meaning that it just, motor got hot, too much timing. So we, that last run had a little bit of knock. We made 411, it's about the same amount of torque. So we did make more power, but like I said, we did hear knock at the expense of knock. So we heard it right at 4,500 or 5,500 RPMs, which makes sense because that's right at peak torque. That's also where So I'm gonna go ahead and connect to it so we can get the old timing back where we did not see knock. And that might have been a little bit aggressive. That previous number was like 13, but we'll leave it at that because it needs to be safe. And it really didn't yield any more power. The knock was audible. I'm not gonna even bother doing a plug chop at this point because I could hear it. And so here's what it comes down to. If you're not having any real knock detection, what good is this run here, 404 versus 411? That's relatively nothing in terms of damaging the motor. You're gonna make 7 more horsepower and then put strain on the motor just because you see the numbers rising. So guys, when all right, so we didn't hear any knock at all. So what I'm going to do though is I'm gonna make the ignition correction really aggressive. And so what happens is that when you start to get up to your intake air temps start to spike and stuff like that, hot air comes in and obviously it will start to knock from just too much temperature. So we're gonna go ahead and make our corrections based off of that, make it a little bit more aggressive. And that way we have a safety net. So I think it looks pretty aggressive now already. By 60 degrees IATs, it's already pulling 2 degrees out. So we're gonna go ahead and just kind of give it one more here. And I don't think we're going to actually ever see this because remember, this car is going to Washington State. So it's basically probably not going to see that. And then we're gonna pull a little bit of correction here out of the temps just in case it starts to overheat, because it is in fact a drift car, so that can potentially happen. So we'll pull out a little bit more there, and I would like to say we're gonna call this one good. I think this one's good to go here. All right, so we got the Cressida off the dyno, car's warmed up, put some air in the front tires. It doesn't really feel that fast to me, but as usual I'm going to take it down the street here and just make sure that we hit the targets that we have to hit, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it back up in terms of cleaning up the ECU and the wiring and all that jazz.